Hi all, an interesting game from the Amber Rapid was played yesterday. Magnus Carlsen, who was in the lead in the tournament, actually got really done over by Vassily Ivanchuk. So, how did this happen? It reminds me of something which Nigel Short mentioned actually about the French defence Winawer, that the problem with the Winawer variation is G7. But this game maybe is an argument that actually, you know, black does generate potentially a lot of counterplay if white is attracted into trying to win G7 in the French Winawer. So let's see. After E4, E6, D4, D5, we have standard French defence position, and two of the most popular moves are Knight D2 or Knight C3. Now, Knight C3 suffers from the fact that it offers black the opportunity to inflict a seemingly painful pin on that knight. So Knight C3, the French defence Winawer variation. But the weakness of the last move, the Bishop B4, and in general the pawn structure and the pawn chain here, means that actually G7 is a bit vulnerable to a move like Queen G4. Seemingly rule-breaking move, but it's kind of justified and theoretical often to play this move in this sequence. So after E4, C5, the usual move first though is to stabilise the centre here, not Queen G4 immediately, believe it or not. That's why A3 actually resolves the tension with this bishop, so that the white centre is strengthened, and it was a favour of Fischer, this variation. White gets the bishop here, but the downside is black can get good counterplay as well in this variation, and can sometimes often castle queenside and play on the structure later and play for F6 breaks later. So it's an unbalanced position for both sides, potentially losing trump cards for both sides. But here this is slightly different, and I'm curious. I was curious. I put it into chess games called the Opening Explorer, this immediate Queen G4, and it's a very rarely played option to A3. So the Queen excursion to go for that G7 pawn seems okay in principle. It seems to be reminiscent of the main line, but the subtle differences here are kind of revealed now after Knight E7. So white takes that G7 pawn. So the question is it poisoned or not, this pawn? So we have poisoned pawns with queens taking pawns offset from the center. So white is decentralizing, obviously, but on the plus side, there's a potentially running pawn here later. The thing is, and by transposition, this has occurred before. This sequence of either CD and Queen A5 has occurred before here. So where white has not taken the opportunity to first strengthen the center, forcing Bishop C3. So he's seen it now, the subtle difference. Queen A5, and white actually has to defend C3 now. There's a very real threat of Bishop C3. So Magnus plays Bishop D2. And now black takes on D4, forcing a knight retreat. So white's centre's actually been gobbled here a little bit. Knight B1. It looks passive for white. I don't think statistically this is good for white. From at least like the chess games Opening Explorer, this is bad news for white here, this position. So Knight BC6. Okay, now Bishop D7. Black prepares to castle queenside, and white's really under pressure already, on G2 as well. So normal kingside development has been inhibited. Not only that, Magnus has made, to keep these spectator pieces here for a while, he plays a pawn move, A3, but it's not even threatening anything because the pawn is actually pinned. So it's just ignored. Ivanchuk just castles queenside, offering actually the F7 pawn as well. But Magnus is not that materialistic at the moment. He plays actually C3, really trying to get rid of this bishop. So finally now, DC knight takes C3. Is the bishop going to move? No. Again, it's still pinned to the rook on A1. So Ivanchuk just plays D4, hitting actually the E5 pawn. So this isn't too good. There seems to be a potential threat though, which is used here, knight b5, trying to maybe come in to the dark squares, especially once this dark square bishop is exchanged, because at the moment it's protecting d6. So we have bishop takes d2, knight takes, but now the d6 square is just simply protected with this next move. Well, it does other things as well, like reinforce the d4 pawn. Knight f5. Again, f7 is being offered. Actually, let's have a quick look here with Houdini here about the f7 as a quick question. Queen f7. Actually, knight takes e5, much better for black, hitting the queen. So say the queen did like move there, then actually, sorry, bishop takes b5 is winning a piece. So this would force actually b4. It's not pleasant. And here there's a nice move. Well, either queen b6 is strong as well, just keeping an attack on these two guys. So that's no good for white to take that f7 pawn basically. Let's turn that off. That was just a quick question. So rook c1, pinning the knight. Now the knight's unpinned, king b8, b4, and two actually options are very attractive here. Either queen a6 as played or queen a4. This I have checked before with Houdini, queen a4, and this is perfectly brilliant. You know, very very nice for black. So say knight d6, you could just take on e5. This kind of variation. White's really collapsing, like losing material here in this sequence. Or instead of knight d6, let's say knight e4, knight takes b4. Really, you know, white is just underdeveloped with spectator pieces. So it was a kind of poison pawn, this g7, when white especially hasn't stabilized the center by playing a3. Now that's just an intuitive assessment. I mean, maybe there was a specific reason Magnus had for this variation with the accelerated queen g4 idea, but I don't see it myself at the moment. Maybe it will be revealed on his blog or something soon. But this is just a terrible position, because we have here basically spectator pieces. Any gambit, you know, often tries to show that the opponent's pieces have far less quality. When you play a gambit, you get initiative, and the quality difference makes the opponent's pieces look like spectators, and certainly they look like spectators here, which is why I thought the game was kind of intriguing. So knight d3 for Magnus. Pardon me. This is just a variation here. So queen a4 looks to be particularly dangerous as well. So we've seen either knight d6 or knight e4 have terrible consequences. Just to review that again, knight d6, knight e5, and white's centre's kind of collapsing, as well as like a3 and there's other possibilities. But knight e4, you know, maybe trying to get into d6 or c5, just knight takes b4 is strong. It's just horrendous. And if we go into this a little bit, you know, what if the knight's taken here, then bishop takes b5. So if knight d2, just take here, it's just falling to bits for white basically. This queen is just not exerting influence on the game. So in the game though, this queen a6 was played. Maybe that's technically a little bit inferior, but still a very good move, because it's keeping the threat actually of knight takes b4 on this b5 knight. That's one thing. It's also keeping pressure on a3. If the knight moves, then queen a3. So white's kind of in a very difficult position here, let's say. So Magnus plays queen h3, and then we have knight takes e5, so hitting the knight on b5. Knight takes d4, attacking the queen. Queen moves to the center. Now the center, which is like the magic of the board, you know, your pieces are independent of going to the left or right or anywhere. You're creating independence, you're creating magic. The center is very, very strong for black here, because that central queen move, with this central move, bishop c6, is starting to remind me of some of the the Botvinnik wins and the Bronstein match. The central pieces on the D file here are very, very good. So bishop c6, it's a beautiful position here for black. Visually, but also tactically, there's a lot that could go wrong here for white. Magnus is playing this seemingly really poxy move to defend against the pressure on the G file. Now there's a technical kind of knockout computer move which wasn't played, bishop f3 actually. Now you might wonder, what on earth is bishop f3? Well, of course white wouldn't be able to take, because then rook g1. But if he takes with the knight, there's a cheeky move here. This is Houdini. Rook h8, just winning the queen. The queen's not given any escape squares from these poor knights and its own knight. So that's a very, very cheeky move which was missed. Instead, bishop d5 was played. And now it's more than an inaccuracy. This next move really, according to engine analysis, knight h4 here is the incisive move, and this next move played by him almost gives away the advantage apparently from a theoretical point of view. Now knight h4, but black could have done a lot better in this position here, instead of this after this queen c3. Let's just check this again with knight h4. So knight h4, what does white do here? What are the concrete threats? Okay, so say, just put in a token move just to see what the concrete threats are. Bishop takes b3, then knight ef3 check, and rook g1. This is pretty nasty stuff, basically, for white. I mean, the king is just in the center still. There's tactical vulnerabilities on the G file, etc. But this next move actually, instead of the knight h4, this next move, apparently the evaluation just went down to like minus 0.7 or something. Still good for black, still brilliant for black, because the king's still stranded in the center. So bishop e2, good move maybe in the circumstances, offering the G pawn. So is black's initiative able to be defended here? Well, here actually Magnus definitely, according to Houdini, he should have taken the rooks off here with rook g8. That was the best shot. So say rook g8, knight d4. Black's still better, but there's no immediate knockout blow, believe it or not, in this position. Maybe f6 is a good move, then queen b6. It's very dangerous for white, obviously, but there's no immediate knockout blow. In the game continuation, it was a bit embarrassing actually what happened. In the game continuation, queen e3 was played, and the problem is the king is worse on g1 here after allowing rook takes g1, because now queen d5 threatens, well, as well as putting a little bit of pressure on the knight, which might be handy, but not too relevant here, because white's on the knight on e5. That was the point of queen e3 as well, put black a bit under pressure. But there's the immediate threat, more critically, of queen g2 mate, and also rook g1s with the idea of king f1, queen h1 mate. So this queen right in the center is a totally magic piece, totally independent of going anywhere, especially around white's king. Though is the most dangerous and most critical for white legally being able to play on. And in fact, white wasn't able to legally play on, because his next move by Magnus, bishop g4, means there's a mate in 1, and it's very rare for the highest rated player on the planet to be allowing a mate in 1 like this. So 28, queen g2 mate. I mean, it was only a rapid game though, let's be fair. But this is a terrible position, because say f3 takes check, and now in this position with white's king safety shot to pieces, you can carry on playing dynamically now, just giving up the knight temporarily. It can't be taken here without losing the queen. Let's just demonstrate that. Just check. You see that'll be a queen decoy, a kick to win the queen. In this position, rook h8, so rook h1, assume rook h1, knight g1, this is a Houdini line by the way, so hitting the rook and the queen, so this is all nasty stuff It's just basically winning an entire rook. So white was busted totally anyway, technically, but f3 maybe the better move than allowing the mate in 1. So bishop g4, mate in 1. So the reason I picked this game, as I say, because I remember recently Nigel Short was going on about the French defence Winawer, showing one of his games, and the big problem being in the French Winawer, the g7 pawn. So although black's getting the trump cards of the doubled pawns and potential nice c-file pressure later and nice endgames, the Achilles heel from a theoretical point of view is sometimes the g7 pawn. But this game demonstrates that if white doesn't stabilise the centre and goes after it too quickly with this move queen g4, it can really backfire on white, because black's going to try and castle queenside. And then later, if he can get more central pieces, he or she can get more central pieces, then black's counterplay can be ferocious, especially if white's pieces here become like spectators in the game, and white king still stuck in the centre is a recipe for total disaster, like this game demonstrated. So Ivanchuk hasn't been doing too well in this tournament so far, but I'm sure he'll be cheered up with this fantastic win. So let's just replay it again. So bishop b3, not the best, but still black hasn't blown his advantage too much, still got a big advantage. And then there was a terrible blunder here, bishop g4, allowing the mate in 1. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.